An elderly father is led to the muddy banks of a river by his sons. They leave him in the dirt, turn, and walk away. There is no one around to offer him even a sip of water. Writhing in the throes of hunger, he is left to struggle and die by the riverbank. Against all odds, the man survives. Exactly how he endures the exposure remains a mystery, but he eventually finds the strength to begin the journey back to his village. He walks towards his home expecting a joyous welcome, a family reunion for a man who had narrowly escaped the grave. But his sons don't offer relief or a warm embrace. Instead, they meet him with immediate, relentless mockery. Day after day, they taunt him with the same question. You were supposed to go to heaven. Why have you come back? Unable to bear the constant rejection and deep anguish, the father walks to a roadside tree and hangs himself. This sequence of abandonment and suicide was driven by the rigid protocols of a practice known as the Antarjali Yatra. The Antarjali Yatra was built on a regional belief that dying on the banks of a river guaranteed a soul an immediate, straight path to heaven. To ensure this transition, a strict societal rule took effect the moment the person reached the water. Relatives and friends were forbidden from ever looking upon the sick person's face again. Outside observers recorded the consequences. In 19th century Calcutta, Missionary Rev Brown documented the brutal reality of these killings committed in the name of religion. Brown watched as the sick were routinely dumped like refuse on the Ganges riverbanks, left to fend for themselves while their families treated them as if they were already gone. The missionary witnessed Brahmins bringing a youth to the water's edge. They poured muddy water down the boy's throat, actively suffocating him. When Brown questioned the act, they explained that their God commanded the boy must die. Killing him in this specific way was an unchangeable tradition. Yet, ancient texts describe Antarjali as a voluntary act, like Vedruni's grandmother choosing to pass away in the water. Earliest records are completely removed from death. The play Uttaramacharitam uses the term for Sita giving birth in the river. Over centuries, the application of the term inverted. A word that once described a mother bringing life out of the river became the label for a crowd forcing life out of a teenager. By the standards of the Antarjali Yatra, the father who returned to his village was no longer a living member of the family. This process is known as societal death. The moment he was abandoned by the river, his community legally and socially erased his existence. In their eyes, the man they had known had already completed his journey to heaven. When he survived, he didn't just escape death, he broke a fatalistic contract. To his sons, he was a ghost trespassing in a home where he no longer belonged. The sons' cruelty was the ultimate enforcement of this belief. They weren't reacting to their father, but to a breach in the tradition they had been taught to uphold. It shows how a practice born from a desire for sacred life can silently shift into a deadly, unquestionable mandate. The Antarjali Yatra successfully erased the distinction between a religious ritual and a murder. It built a society where returning to the living was considered a crime that only a second, more permanent death could resolve.